Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to have this conversation on our summer survival guide because it is that time of year. School has ended or is just about ended, depending on where you are. And now it is time to figure out what summer looks like with your kids and devices. And so we're talking about balancing screen and skills for a fun-filled break. I am excited to be here today, joined with Dr. Lauren Lee from Aura Parents. I'm Jasmine Hood Miller from Common Sense Media, and we have, I think, a pretty interesting and very timely conversation planned for today. And welcome, Dr. Lee.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. It is wonderful to be here.
Great. Just to kick us off, very quickly, we will kind of go over what we're going to cover and then give you the tips that you can take and apply right away at home with your kids. And so that is looking at some of the data from Aura around what kids are doing on their devices, how they're using tech, what's behind that summer screen surge that we see at this time that school is out. And then also touch on, wanting to make sure that kids aren't losing the learning that they spent all year working, really hard on, and that they are not kind of in that summer slide as they, as their schedules change and as they kind of are in much more unstructured time, but not losing necessarily the learning. And then, like I said, getting into some of those really light lift ideas to have a fun, balanced, and enjoyable summer. There is Q&A that is available throughout this session. Our colleagues are in the chat, so please feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll be answering those throughout. And so just very quickly, for folks who may not be familiar with Common Sense Media, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving the lives of kids and families and really providing trustworthy information around education and having an independent voice so that all families can thrive. And we do this in pretty much 4 ways. Most of you who may be familiar with us know us for our media ratings and reviews. And this is how we help families find high quality, age appropriate movies, books, TV shows, and et cetera, so much more. And then if you are an educator or your child's school uses Common Sense Media, we have a K through 12 digital literacy and well-being curriculum. And so we are fostering those skills through our lessons. And then our advocacy work really aims to hold tech companies accountable and to really support laws and policies that put kids first. And so we do that through our advocacy team. And then really kind of undergirding all of that, the foundation is really our research. We do a lot of independent research where we study the impact of media and tech on kids' physical, emotional, and social development. And this informs actually all of the resources and work that I just mentioned. And so I will now turn it to Lauren to talk a bit about Aura Parents.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. We are thrilled to partner with Common Sense Media and to have the chance to chat with you all today. Before I jump into the new data on kids' summer screen time, though, I wanted to give you just a quick backstory on where our research comes from and who we are at Aura Parents. So at our core, we're a safety and well-being app that is designed hand in hand with clinical psychologists like myself. And we understand the struggle because we are parents too. So many families are trying to navigate this messy reality of raising kids who are essentially growing up online these days. And that's exactly why we built Aura Parents. We wanted to go way beyond the basic, rigid screen time locks and use AI to give parents actual insight to their kids' digital behaviors. Our hope is that we can help parents better understand their kids' online behavior, help them spot potential risks, and then support their child's overall well-being. So because of that, our research is not just theoretical, it is deeply rooted in real family experiences, actual device data, and honest feedback from parents and kids who are experiencing these challenges every single day. Next slide, please, Jasmine. Thank you. Today, we are going to unpack some findings from our latest report, which is State of the Youth to Infinity and Autoplay. And here, we're really exploring what's happening behind the screen as kids' summer device use surges. And spoiler, not so spoiler alert, kids spend a lot more time on their screens during the summer. I want to start, though, before we get into just how much time they're spending on their devices, by taking a step back, because one of the most eye-opening takeaways from our report is that as summer screen time goes up, digital well-being takes a hit. In fact, we find that 1 in 3 kids fall into what we classify as low digital well-being during the summer months. To measure this, we use our Digital Well-Being Index, which tracks shifts in online behavior patterns that our research has identified directly links to kids' mood, sleep, stress, and other behaviors. And what we see is that when children have higher digital well-being scores, they're more likely to get better sleep, to experience less stress, and to just be in a better mood day to day. The reality for a lot of families is that screen time is starting to crowd out some of the classic activities that we know and associate with childhood summers. And one stat that really jumped out at us was that 75% of younger kids told us they would actually rather watch videos than play with toys. So ultimately, summer vacation is being redefined by technology. It is shifting how our kids are playing, hanging out, relaxing, and using their free time. And sometimes, unfortunately, that shift can really come at a cost. So like I mentioned just a moment ago, right, when school lets out, we notice that screen time starts to climb. And it's really because once we have the loss of those school routines and that structure, kids have a lot of unstructured free time. Suddenly, what we see is that weekend screen use starts to creep up until it hits weekend level usage, and then it stays there all summer long. And our research shows that screen time jumps by nearly 30% for younger kids, which is equivalent to 4 extra hours per week. Teens are similar. They increase by 15%, which is 3 extra hours per week. But there's a couple of points that I want to dig into here, because as much as it's interesting that screen time increases, it's also interesting to know some of the behaviors that are driving that increase in screen time. And one of the things that we noticed was that for teens, there's a mid-afternoon kind of surge that happens. They get on their devices by mid-afternoon, and then they're staying there. And that's just the norm for teens. But even more striking is what's happening at night. So from our research, we saw that more than 1 in 10 kids are on their devices at midnight and after midnight. And we also see that nighttime messaging more than doubles in the summer across all age groups. So these nighttime behaviors, coupled with sort of this afternoon teen behavior, are kind of key to driving up those hours.
Well, that's actually really interesting that you have that information on the exact time of day that you're seeing this behavior happening.
It is, yeah, it's one of those wonderful things that comes from having actual device data from children users, is that we're able to really dig in and see those fine details. So I've talked a little bit about how much time kids are spending online. Let's talk about where they're spending their time online. When you look at teens, perhaps not surprisingly, it is going to be social media that absolutely dominates their screen time. But for the younger crowd, what we see is that YouTube and Roblox, they take up the lion's share. They account for about 90% of the total time spent across the top 5 platforms that younger kids are on. And I want to give you an idea of kind of the relative scale here, because I think it's quite eye-opening. Roblox alone gets more than 4 times the usage of TikTok for this younger crowd. So just to give you an idea, right, the difference between second place and third place is actually quite huge. When we zoom out a bit, now that we've talked about how much time and where they're spending time, I think there's a bigger picture that is helpful to understand. And that is that parents often look at screens as being a source of entertainment. But for a lot of kids, they are increasingly becoming primary social venues. Screens are where friendships are being sort of kept alive, identities are being explored, and social norms are being learned. So whether it's a shared Roblox experience or a favorite YouTube creator or a viral TikTok trend, these shared digital moments with each other are becoming massive in how our children are building their social currency and feeling as though they belong. And I think this data point really drives home this point that I'm making, which is that 79% of children ages 7 to 11 said that watching the same content as their peers helps them to feel closer to them. And again, they're not together. They're just watching the same content separately, but that's enough for them to feel more socially connected to each other. So it's no wonder that screen time is such a challenge for parents and for children, because screens are really serving several roles. And I think for parents, it's really, really challenging because you can be sitting right next to your kid on the couch and still not have any idea who they're talking to, what they're looking at, or where they're actually spending their time online. I mean, the platforms that our children are on are becoming the new gathering spots. I mean, they're akin to playgrounds or malls or neighborhood hangout spots that we sort of attribute or associate with our own childhoods. The problem is they're available to our kids 24/7. And with that comes, a massive increase in risk and exposure to risk. Some of those risks are inappropriate content, cyberbullying, scams, and unsafe interactions. And on the unsafe interaction point, right, really important to understand, it's not just sort of chat platforms where this can exist, right? Gaming platforms, chat platforms, social media platforms. Essentially, anywhere that your child is exposed to strangers can be ripe with unsafe interactions. And so for parents, right, they're really trying to balance this online and offline world for their children. But the digital world is infinitely larger, it is faster, and it is so much harder for parents to keep an eye on than any physical space that we might, again, consider from our own childhood.
That is like very fascinating, because as I'm listening to you, Lauren, I'm hearing that on the one hand, it's not so dissimilar from what we had, the experiences that we had growing up in wanting to have those shared media experiences, right? Like everything wasn't on demand. For us, it was like you watched that show, on a certain day and time, and then you went back to school or you talked to your friends about, whatever, happened on the show. Or like you said, meeting up at the mall and those things. It is. And so I think parents trying to wrap their head around, it's not just all entertainment. It's also how kids are connecting. But then the, unfortunate parts of like that connection also being kind of clouded by some of the more trickier aspects of, being online for kids.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's rough, right? Because it's not all good and it's not all bad. Just like screen time, right? It's not necessarily always the total amount of time, but it's what's being done during that time. So there's a lot of nuance. And because every child is different and every situation is different, even harder for parents, right? Because it's really about knowing your child in this way.
Yeah, and even more tricky if you have multiple kids and who have different. Like I have 3 kids, and so like what I do with one is not necessarily what works for another, and so trying to navigate that is all the more fun for for parents.
Right, as if parenting wasn't hard enough.
Exactly.
So it's really natural, as screen time is creeping up, that a lot of parents naturally are worrying that classic childhood activities are sort of getting pushed to the side. In fact, more than half of the parents in our survey say that scrolling has replaced activities that their children used to love, such as reading and drawing. But what's more interesting here, too, is that parents are saying they're seeing a real world impact on the attention spans of their children and their daily behaviors. And so to put some numbers on it, 73% of parents say that their child has lost patience with anything that is slower paced in terms of an activity or even, say, a show. And 71% say that their child cannot sit through a 90-minute movie without reaching for a second screen. So on top of all of that, so the lack of patience, the desire to have multiple screens or needing multiple pieces of stimulation, parents are also noting that there are meltdowns, there's irritability, there's tech rage even when devices are being taken away. So it's exactly because of these reasons, right? Because we're seeing the online experiences of our children impact their offline worlds and their interactions with us. This is why it's so important that we truly understand where kids are spending their time online and then help them to build these healthier digital boundaries around their relationship with tech. In fact, it has become, to your point, Jasmine, the single biggest challenge of modern parenting today.
I can believe that, and I think a lot of the parents that we have joining us today are also feeling that, where there's there's chores and there's other things that you may have that you have to repeat or have arguments with your kid about, but like the one that is the trickiest to really, kind of, I think, see eye to eye on is this relationship with technology. And I think that as much as we can, we try to help parents kind of relate and understand with what their kids are going through, and understanding how, like the example you gave of like using a device while watching a show. There are lots of adults, myself included, who that's not, that atypical. Is just that, it's right there, and we are so used to multitasking and all of these things. And so if it's a challenge for us, if you could challenge an adult to like sit through something and not have their phone or another device going, imagine how challenging that is for kids. And so trying to have some empathy there and understand, but then also provide that guidance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the modeling of behaviors, so key as well, for kids. What is making this challenge of screen time and children's relationship to tech even more urgent is that screens aren't just like serving up content anymore. This is with the advent or the rise of AI companions. We're witnessing this massive shift from passive media consumption to active media interaction. And it's really marking a brand new phase in how our kids are relating to technology. Kids are now spending time in digital spaces and with digital entities that are having the power to alter how they socialize, how they learn, and how they're seeking companionship. And part of what makes this so difficult is that our kids are experiencing emotional connections to these AI companions, and it feels very real to them. Nearly half of the younger kids in our survey said that talking to an AI companion feels just like talking to a real life friend. So I think it's really important that parents don't necessarily treat these AI companions as entertainment, but really see them as environments and platforms that are actively shaping a child's development in real time. I mean, parents have noticed this. They shared with us that nearly half of parents shared with us that their child at least sometimes believes that AI has real thoughts and real feelings. So they're essentially personifying, right, an AI agent. Ultimately, what we're seeing now is that AI is sort of has these blurred lines, right? Because is AI a helpful tool? Is AI a companion? Or potentially, is it being considered a trusted voice in the lives of our children? And that's the one that I really want to make a fine point on, because I think that's the one that's probably the most challenging, especially when, AI companions are developed for all sorts of reasons and engineered in all sorts of ways, and not always necessarily with your child's best interest in mind.
We also see this in a lot of the research that we've done at Common Sense and the testing that we've done of these platforms. And just about every that we've looked at, particularly when it comes to the companionship piece of kids using these tools as a friend, as an emotional support, or as a place to confide and share their thoughts and ideas. It's not safe for them. And so our guidance is really that for companionship, that like kids of any age under 18 really shouldn't be using it for that. It's just not designed for that. It's not designed well for kids in general, but especially not for any kind of mental health or emotional support. And, trying to help parents and teens and kids just find those spaces where they have, a trusted adult, whether it's the parent or another, a coach or another adult in their life that can be that person that they go to during, whether it's, a challenging time or difficult questions or just, everyday kind of conversations, and that the AI chatbots are just not the place for that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think it's so interesting because they are engineered to be very human-like, right? They're engineered to mimic natural kind of human conversation and engagement. And at the same time, the interactions that we have with them are often not realistic at all, right? Because they will agree with us. They never get frustrated or lose their patience. They're there to give lots of positive reinforcement and try to meet certain emotional needs, right? So it's just not even realistic of what an interaction looks like in the real world that our children could be having, and they do need that practice. with that as part of their development growing up.
Sure. We have a whole other conversation around AI and spend lots of time there.
Absolutely. So there's alarming news, right? Some of the data that I'm sharing with you could feel kind of alarming. I do want to hit a high note though, because I do think that there is good news, and that is that our kids still really are seeking real world connection. When we asked kids what they were most looking forward to this summer, it was not staring at a tablet. It was going outside, and it was hanging out with your friends in person. So I think that's a positive thing to just like anchor on in terms of how we're thinking about how our children are thinking about their free time and how they want to spend it. We also found that more than half of kids that we surveyed recognized that too much screen time is not good for them. So those 2 points right there, for me, at least as a parent myself, give me hope that there is a desire again to do things that are offline, to do things that are much more connected to the real world. And so I hope that gives you some hope too. I do have a couple of pieces of advice that I just wanted to share around how you might help create more balance in your child's life around their tech use, and some more boundaries around it. And the first one may be a little surprising, maybe not, but it is to let your kids be bored. The reason that I say this is because a lot of the time screens are being used, right, to stop boredom or to preoccupy children, as if not being preoccupied and having to sit without anything to do is a bad thing. And we see this in adults, right? And we see this in ourselves as well. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is to, basically tolerate the whining that's going to come from your kids saying I'm bored over and over and over again, and let them have 30, 45 minutes where they're bored and they have to figure out how they're going to spend their time without a device. I think you'll be surprised at what they come up with, and maybe even some of the hobbies that they might return to or pick back up when the device is not an option anymore and they are feeling bored and they have to use their own resources to figure out how to get out of that boredom. Let them be bored. You might be surprised with what you find. The next sort of piece of advice that I have is not to just lock down your child's device. Don't just take their device, put in your parental controls and hand it back to them and sort of call it a day. And the reason that I say this is because when you can collaborate with your child and help them build their own understanding and their awareness around the boundaries that you're setting, and most specifically why you're setting those boundaries, it can go a long way towards down the road when you have to enforce those limits or those boundaries so that it feels less punitive to your child. And so they feel more like they understand it. One of the things that I always say as the parent to my own daughter is that like my number one job is to keep you safe. That is my number one job. And really, if you think about it, what we're doing with trying to create some bounds for our children around our tech use, that is our way of keeping them safe. So by having conversations with them, helping them to understand why you have the limits that you have, and sort of why that is meant to keep them safe, I think it can go a long way towards down the road when inevitably, you have to take the tablet or the device away. And then this actually hits on something that you mentioned earlier, Jasmine, around really having these conversations with your kid around what they're experiencing and how they're using their tech. So especially around social pressure, right? I think for so many kids, they feel like they must be online because everybody else is online. Why can't I play Roblox? Everybody else is playing Roblox. And being able to really understand where your child is coming from, how it does maybe make them feel excluded. It doesn't mean that by knowing that information, you're all of a sudden going to let them play Roblox or whatever the platform is. But just knowing that, I think, can go a long way towards having empathy for their perspective and not seeing it as them wanting to be difficult, right? Or just wanting to be like everybody else. It really is fulfilling a need for them. And the last thing that I'll say to close out sort of sharing about this report. I get asked this a lot, like what are the warning signs that tech is negatively impacting your child? And what I want to say is that it is true. The signs are usually visible offline first when tech is impacting negatively your kid. So here's just 4 things that I want you to keep an eye out for. The first is the sneaking or the use of devices late at night. You'll remember I sort of spoke to that a couple slides ago when talking about driving up screen time, but this is a key one. The next is pulling away or withdrawing from offline activities that your kid, used to enjoy. The third is sudden changes in the apps or the platforms that they're using. This is why it's really important to know as much as you can what they're doing on their devices. And then the last is, that noticeable mood drop or that shift that happens after your kid has been online. If you're noticing any of those come up for you, then it could really be a sign that the tech is driving your child instead of your child driving the tech. And it could be a signal to intervene, right? And to set some more balance or some more boundaries around the tech use for your kid. So with all of that said, I am going to pass the mic back to you, Jasmine, because I know you're going to tell us a little bit more about how we can make that mindset shift around managing the summer screen surge.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. And I think this is what actually makes parents a great partner, right? Because our job is not just to sound the alarm of all of the negative stats and facts around what kids are doing. It's to make parents aware for sure, but also to provide that guidance. And so as our families are moving into summer break mode, it's helpful to, I think, just remind ourselves that this time of year, it is normal for screen time to go up, but we want to do that with some intention and to make sure that we are, really setting ourselves up for success with balance. And so there's an opportunity to use media and tech for fun and for edutainment, if you will, where you can use it for learning, but also to not, to kind of let go a little bit. So that's this relax, relate, release, right? The learning doesn't necessarily have to stop. You can find fun ways to reinforce things like reading and math skills in a more relaxed way and through fun challenges. But also very much what Lauren said is understanding that the platforms that the kids are using and the tools and devices are a way and a very real to them in how they are connecting with peers, maybe friends who are away for the summer and are trying to stay connected. So understanding that and kind of respecting and again helping them set those boundaries and balance to be able to honor that, but also not be completely tied and tethered to their devices. And then I think the last part is really just to kind of release that guilt, right? It is summertime. The last thing we want to be doing is stressing out. We want to have some creative ways that we can spend time together as a family, but not necessarily, with a lot of all the rules that you would typically have during a school year. And so it's okay to loosen screen time rules a bit, and even making it a family affair is even better. And so we can talk about some of that learning loss and how we can help our kids keep their skills sharp over the summer. You may have heard of the summer slide, and this is a kind of a phrase that's used to talk about some of the learning loss, particularly in reading and math, that some students experience during the summer months. Studies have shown that kids can lose 1 to 3 months of reading and math progress during the summer, math tending to be a little bit more vulnerable than reading. And this is, particularly concerning, or the experience is greater for lower income families because of some of the equity gaps that we have. And so wanting to be able to find resources, and we'll share some of those to help kind of mitigate that loss. And that honestly, when we can engage our kids during the summer, not in a very school-like way necessarily, but again, having different ways to keep them engaged and not just on their device, on their phone all day long, whether it's, that mid-afternoon through the rest of the day. Having things that are available to them are, ways to help kind of offset some of that. And so, we want to find fun ways to do that outdoors, spending time outside, and really creative emotional support for them. And so some of these examples are, exploring local resources. So rec centers, summer camps, and other summer offerings tend to have different themes like STEM, arts, sports, and these really keep kids' brains active without necessarily feeling like a chore. Visiting the local library, they often have programming for kids, and some of them are, reading related. Some of them are not. They're, libraries are really, really great resources for lots of things, including, I think our local library has like a gaming club that, kids can join. And so where that there's a facilitated space where kids can do the things that they enjoy, be in community with other kids their age, but in a setting that is more, contained and really has some guidance there from the local library, but also, fun reading challenges that you can get into. Also doing things like using cooking as a way to, have fun with math. I do this with my kids where it's a kind of sneaky way that you can, get in some fractions and ratios and time, for finding recipes. We go online, we come up with either we decide ahead of time what we are looking for and we find a recipe to match that, or we're like, okay, these are the ingredients we have, what can we make with this? And so I think that it's, when you do those things together with your kids, those can be fun ways, but it's also a sneaky little way to keep, that learning there. And then for teens who maybe, having their first summer job or their first real job, and this is like its own curriculum, right? So these are lessons that they can have in financial literacy, in responsibility, problem solving, kind of all happening at this time. And so there are ways that kids are still learning. It's just not looking necessarily like a classroom lesson.
I was going to say, Jasmine, about library programs. I am so surprised by, and I'm very lucky, our library, I hope other people that are on this call, that your libraries are similar, but there are sewing classes, there are 3D printing classes, there is chess club. I mean, there's a lot of activities that are available that are completely free that you wouldn't necessarily associate with the library. And so I think it's also just a cool way maybe to expose your kids to things without, say, signing them up for a class or a camp or something along those lines, to just even see if they like it before they commit to something.
Yeah, libraries are, I would say hidden gem, but they're not hidden. They're there, and they have so many really cool programs that they particularly, I think, look to gear towards kids of all ages, which is, I think, the best part, because it could be for little ones, but it also could be for teens. And so tapping into that is actually, I think, one of the best resources that most of us hopefully have access to. And then also looking at how you're using screen time. At Common Sense Media, we've always kind of emphasized that not all screen time is created equal. And so, if we are using or giving our kids some extra, time on Netflix or whatever, maybe make it a documentary. Or if they're, on their devices, having a math game that has some learning and baked into it is very different than just, scrolling all day. And so the context matters of how they're engaging with their screen time and their devices, and not just necessarily the amount of time. And so here are some of the kind of practical tips that we would love to share. And Lauren actually kicked us off with several, and I think even some that we have here. But it's kind of a both and, yes, and the goal for summer is to recharge. Kids have worked, all school year long and have really, put in the work. We've had, tight schedules, lots of homeworks and projects and things like that. And now is the time to kind of give them a break as well as yourself too, right? It's a little bit of a chance to slow down, but we can do that while keeping them ready and prepared to come back to school in the fall. And so that unstructured time is essential for their well-being. Boredom, which Lauren mentioned, is really a key to sparking creativity. And it is okay for them to be bored. My kids are, when they say to me, I'm bored, I'm like, great, that's okay. And so letting them sit with that. And just, again, having that a little bit loose schedule where it gives them a little bit of chance to kind of recharge their batteries, and giving ourselves grace as parents. And then, looking for those everyday moments, whether it's the cooking or, reading challenges that you might do as a family, exploring the outdoors together, those all count as learning. And so I wouldn't be too hard on yourself if you're trying to find or trying to pack in, your summer schedule. It does not have to be all of that. These little moments count as well. And using tech to support that with intention is another great way to do that. And so kind of doing it collectively and thinking about this collectively as a family is a big key. We have our family tech planners that allow you to sit down as a family, have a conversation about what your expectations are. This is something that you can look at and adjust throughout the year, because what it might look like for the school year will look different for the summer. And so loosening some of those rules for the summer is totally okay. And I 100% agree with you, Lauren, that having a conversation with your kids, getting their buy-in is actually probably the most critical part. It's not that they necessarily are making all the rules, but having them understand why we're setting certain boundaries, giving them those explanations, hearing their voices too, as you're designing this planner that works for your family and fits with your family's values, is actually what makes it stick more. It makes them have more of a buy-in to honoring those expectations. And, doing that to align with your family values is key, because what may work for one household doesn't necessarily work for another. What you want to prioritize over the summer, what you want to have your kids, really kind of put at the forefront of like how they're using their tech time is part of that conversation. And so figuring out what feels right for your family based on the things that you want. Is it being present? Is it, spending time together? Is it spending time outside? Like, what are the things that you want to have as part of your summer experience? And how is tech necessarily helping that, or maybe getting in the way of that? And so it's part of that conversation as well. And then, checking in regularly. It could be weekly. It could be whatever, cadence it feels right for you, but it could be very brief. It doesn't have to be like a long-winded thing, but just, like, how is it feeling the first couple of weeks of summer? A lot of times that just like that decompression is like, whew, okay, we're done with the school year. But then you realize like, okay, and then I'm maybe speaking from, personal experience, but like you kind of let it all go. And then you're like, okay, wait, we can't just like let it all go. We have to like, put those boundaries there. And so, checking back in, see what's working, readjusting is completely okay and normal. And that's okay if you need to tweak those screen time limits, or just, how we're encouraging our kids to use their devices and be able to maintain their connections, but also make space for other things.
I think what's so interesting that sort of cuts across everything that you've shared so far, and I think that I spoke to as well, is that, we're not aiming for perfection here. We're not suggesting that screens need to be eliminated completely. I think it's much more about looking for simple routines and small habits that you can incorporate into your day-to-day life that give a break from the screen, right? And certainly if you are able to and want to have scheduled screen-free time, absolutely, by all means do that. But it could be as simple as just screen-free meals. It could be as simple as device-free bedtime. It could be every night after, everybody gets home or we have a meal together, we go for a walk outside. These small habits and small changes can really build up a lot and have a big impact. So I really like how we're talking about this because it's realistic. It's not saying that you have to be all or none with it, because that's just not feasible. It's just not feasible in today's age.
Yeah. Exactly. So these are some resources from Aura and Common Sense that we have to share with you. And I think we will also drop some of those links in the chat. If not, they will also be shared in an email after. And so the 90s summer quiz, Lauren, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, so it's so interesting because we've been talking a lot about help your kids spend more time offline, and it's very easy to say, it's hard to do, and it's why we created in partnership Common Sense Media and Aura Parents our 90s summer quiz. You can find it at auraparents.com, but it's really meant to help you start to shift some of your children's favorite online interests into offline activities that are fun for them. So for example, let's say your child is really into Minecraft. A lot of kids are. Well, what about let's build with traditional old school Legos instead of Minecraft? Similar, goal or interests, but just doing something that's analog or offline. Or maybe your child really likes the TikTok dances. Instead of a TikTok dance, maybe we do a family talent show or a neighborhood talent show, something along those lines. Just anything that you can do to honor and really respect what they're interested in, but finding substitutes. If you go to this quiz, you can put in some of those interests, and then hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some inspiration for some activities that are offline instead.
Those are really fun to make those analog connections. Another piece that you can kind of put in your back pocket is our summer survival guide, which launched, and that is 8 weeks of media that's matched to your kids' interests and also to some of the learning goals that you might have for them. And so it's a fun interactive that we have that you can sign up for, that you put in your kids' information, or not like their age range and like what they're interested in. And then we provide a curation of media picks that support that and are actually delivered right to your inbox, so you don't have to kind of like go trying to figure out what are we going to do this week. And so there will be those resources available in our app and in our email. The device agreement we kind of talked about, and that is, again, having that discussion and setting expectations together as a family. We have done this in partnership, again, with Aura Parents. And so there are 3 options of age range from elementary, middle, and high school. So depending on the age of your kid, being able to have that discussion and kind of come up with some shared rules around how we're going to be using our devices. And then the other piece that we have from Common Sense Media are our media reviews that I mentioned earlier. We have our Parents Ultimate Guides, and these are really just our way of kind of walking parents through all of the apps and tools that kids are using, how they're using them, what to look for within those, what are the features, maybe what are some of the parental controls that you can set within those platforms, and just understand kind of what it is that kids are using.
And then another really helpful way to sort of better understand what might be driving some of your children's tech behaviors or screen behaviors is by understanding how much digital stress they're experiencing. And digital stress is like a heavy pressure that kids feel from being constantly plugged in. It stems from wanting to be available all the time, fear that you might be missing something that's happening online, or anxiety that you might even feel from anything you've posted online. And so for parents, I think really understanding like, what is my child's digital stress level, and understanding how that maps on to some of their patterns or behaviors can be helpful, again, for intervening. Remember, it's about really understanding like, what is the emotional toll that your child's online life is having in their offline life. It's not always going to be about the sheer number of hours that they're looking at their screens. Again, it's like, what's the impact of that time? So this is another initiative, the digital stress test, that Aura Parents and Common Sense Media teamed up for. And it's pretty simple. It's just 5 questions. You will receive a score out of 25. But really, the output of it is so that you have a clearer picture around the patterns that your child is engaging in and how indicative that might be of the digital stress, so that you have more information and you can talk with them about it or come up with a plan with them around how they can experience less digital stress.
So just to kind of leave you with a couple more fun ideas to try out this summer, you can do a family movie night ×2. So we already offer, if you're signed up for our newsletter, you might get our family movie night, which recommends a movie for your family based on your child's interests, but maybe double it. Maybe find another night of the week that you can do that. There's a fun challenge that I think would be interesting. We have also a books, movies based on books. And so if you do like this book challenge where you're reading the book and then find the movie, like that's also a way to kind of incorporate media in a fun way. Again, the online recipes, finding some fun new ones, maybe seeing if you can, have something that runs you through up to Labor Day. Family game night is that's a big hit in my house anyway. We do it with card games, board games, but also video game tournaments. And I think this is where, like you just mentioned, Lauren, showing interest in what our kids are interested in actually really opens up a lot of conversation and a lot of gives us the space to hear from them and understand what is it that is so appealing about this, whether it's a video game or any other platform. But in my house, watching my kids, I don't necessarily love all the video games, or I'm not a video gamer, right? I'm not a gamer, but I can sit there and watch what they're doing, but then also we can get into it. And so Mario Kart is a fun favorite here because it works for all the age ranges that we have. And I'm not great at it, but it makes it a fun family night. And so everyone can kind of get involved. Then
playing video games with your kids is a humbling experience.
Yeah. I'm just like my youngest is 5. I was like, how are you so good at this? I don't understand. How are you better than me? But yeah, that it is fun because they get to kind of be, the experts there. If we're increasing the amount of time on hours, make it match the amount of time that we're spending outside too. So, if you're, seeing that okay, well, we've done some gaming, but now let's go get some fresh air. Let's, go for a walk, and trying to have that balance is another way to, keep it balanced, but keep it fun. And then again, just doubling down on that boredom. And we've mentioned this a couple of times, and I think it's just something to, really kind of get back to, and resist the urge as a parent to, fill in all of those moments for our kids. And when they come to you saying, I don't know what to do, I'm bored. And I think, like you said, if you just leave them and let them sit with it for a little bit, they will find, this is, what kids do. They are creative in so many ways, and they will find something to fill that space. And if you need to, kind of assist them with we're going to take the devices out or move them somewhere else where they're not gravitating to that, but making, other choices to kind of fill their time, letting them embrace that boredom is actually a really great thing.
I'll also just make a final plug for the Aura Parents 90 Summer Quiz, because I do think that's a really fun way, especially when it's hard to think of ideas ourselves, to try to match some of those offline behaviors to what your kids are doing online that really seems to grab their attention.
Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us today. We have been really happy to partner with Aura Parents and to provide these resources for families, to share the stats and information, but also the tips and, the ways to not just know about it, but actually do something about it. And so you can find us at commonsensemedia.org and auraparents.com, all of the resources that we shared. And we hope you all have a great and wonderful summer.
Thank you, everybody. Happy summer.
Thank you.